Hello, welcome to this video on the practice final for Harmony 4, in which we will consider how each answer was arrived at. Okay, let's take question number 1. Now the first thing is you have to come up with the name of the mode. It's obviously useful to look at the first and last notes. Those will often give some kind of clue. And then sing through the melody in your mind. Many of you will just by ear spot what the mode is, but if you're still not getting it by ear, then add up the note collection. Doing that, you'll realize that that has a minor third, so it's a minor mode. It doesn't have a flat 2, so it's not Phrygian. And then you look for the sixth, and the sixth is a major sixth. It's got and the flat's a flat 7, so there you go. It's Dorian by doing the intervals. The other way to do it is to look at the number of flats or sharps. One flat, what major key has one flat? F major. What note is G in F major? The second note, what mode is the second mode? Dorian, therefore this is a G Dorian scale. Step is to do the chords. As you know, in modal music there's only one tonic chord. So each of these measures that says tonic chord, you're just going to use the 1 minor 7 chord. When it comes to figuring out the modal interchange chord, you're just going to borrow from a parallel G mode. You look at the melody and you consider what mode does that suggest, and hopefully you'll realize right away that we have a major ninth or a major second, so that rules out Phrygian. It's got to be a minor mode because it's got a minor third. So the only one left is Aeolian, and there it is. You can see all those notes would fit with Aeolian. So you think of all your Aeolian modal interchange chords that would fit well with this melody, and you come up with a number of possibilities there. And then a cadence chord, you want to make sure that you include the character note, in this case E natural, so 4 major would be a good one. 2 minor would also be a possibility. Your answer key, flat 6 major 7 is the one that I chose for this example, but some of the other possibilities are down here as well. And that's a very Dorian sound with that little modal interchange thrown in. Okay, moving on to question 2. Analyze the following chord progression. So the first step is to analyze. So you go through and you do your Roman numerals analysis on this. So if you haven't done this yet, pause the video and do that. Here's the answer for the analysis. Next step, realize the harmony and hybrid voicings. All hybrids will have the same root as the original chord. So the first step would be to just put in all your roots. Let's do that. And as usual, don't forget to be careful about accidentals. The next step is to do the voicings. This is where your knowledge and your memorization of upper structures in given modes will speed your process. You need to know what is a typical and useful upper structure to convey an altered sound. What is a number of typical upper structures that would convey an Aeolian sound, that would convey the chord scale that goes with this? Lydian flat 7, Dorian, Lydian flat 7, and Lydian. For this, you should refer to the chart that I supplied and also your own knowledge of how to build hybrids. As I've said previously, working out hybrids, knowing the process for doing it is important, but in an exam situation or when you need to be writing music, quickly, you need to have information more at your disposal, right at the tip of your tongue, so to speak. And the way to do this is by memorizing the upper structures. You can see Ionian just has one available hybrid upper structure, 5 major over 1, the 1 of the chord that you're replacing. So C major 7 could be replaced with G over C. Dorian, you've got all 3 possible sources. You just have to memorize 2 minor, 5 minor, flat 7 major over 1. And the 7th chord's 5 minor 7 and flat 7 major 7 over 1. And so on, just going down the list. And then don't forget the Lydian flat 7 ones and the altered dominant one, which is a major triad, a tritone away from the root. So take a minute to complete your triads. You can use the chart as reference, but try to do it. I would suggest that you first try to memorize the upper structures and then do it from memory and then check with the chart. And then once you're done with that, you can pause the video, and then when you're done with that, you can look back for the answers. Altered sound, major triad, tritone away from the root, C over F sharp. Aeolian, 5 minor over 1. Lydian flat 7, 2 major over 1. Dorian flat 7 major over 1. Lydian flat 7, 2 major over 1. And Lydian 2 major over 1. Now I'll do a different solution, one more coming up. This is what we had before. Here's the new version. Same altered chord, D over F sharp. Now we have flat 7 major over 1 for the Aeolian. Now we have flat 7 augmented over 1 for Lydian flat 7. Now we have 5 minor over 1 for Dorian. Flat 7 augmented over 1 for Lydian flat 7. And now we have 7 minor over 1 for Lydian. I just only use triads for this one just to save time, but you could use 7th chords too. So I'm going to recommend a particularly narrow approach for this. However, in the real world, when you're experimenting with polychords, you could expand this approach as is outlined in the book. But again, this is just sort of a way to sort of help you get one method down that would be hopefully very efficient for you under the time pressure of a test. And the method is as follows. You decide in advance that you're going to make the lower structure be a root, a third, and a seventh, no fifth. The third and seventh could be in any order, but the root must be on the bottom. So if you go with that approach, you can just fill in your lower structures first with a root, a third, and a seventh. And that's what I'm going to do next. Why don't you do that if you haven't done it already? Pause the video and then check your answers. I've got my lower structures. There's my root, my third, and my flat 7 because of the key signature. Always be aware of the key signature. There's my root, 7th and 3rd of my B major 7, B flat minor 7, A7, being aware of the need for accidentals, etc. A flat major 7, don't forget it's reverted back to an A flat in the bass. E major 7, paying attention to accidentals, and E flat major 7. And this actually does follow voice sitting because you can move any single voice as much as a third, and there's no single voices moving more than a third. You could also do the same thing with all these notes up an octave if you prefer that sound. Next step, figure out upper structures, but now you have the luxury of just thinking about tensions because your chord tones are all taken care of. So you're going to, in the upper structure, you're going to have tensions and possibly some chord tone duplications. You already know what the good upper structure for an altered chord is, right? A major triad, a tritone away from the root. Let's start with that. Sharp major over C7 creates an altered sound. And don't forget all your necessary accidentals and so on. This is where you could lose a lot of points if you're not careful about that. And I almost forgot, you got to analyze the progression. So let's do that next, and then we'll finish our polychords. Pause the video, do your analysis, then check. Okay, now we can continue our creation of polychords. And at this point, because you have your analysis, you should know all your chord scales. That one tells you it's an altered scale. Non-diatonic major 7th chords always take, that's right, Lydian. Non-diatonic related 2 chords always take Dorian. Sub 5s always take Lydian flat 7, 4 chord Lydian. Non-diatonic major 7, flat 2 major 7, Lydian. And even the last 1 chord is a Lydian chord. Especially in a test-taking situation, you want to get right to a workable answer. You could just think about tensions now. So think of the tensions available in the Lydian scale. 9, sharp 11, and 13. What's the upper structure that gives you that? That's right, 2 major. Just go with that. Dorian, think about the upper structure that would give you maybe a 9 and 11 available tensions. Lydian flat 7, go with the upper structure that gives the available tensions there. Again, 2 major, etc. Now pause the video using that line of thinking. Create your upper structures. Then start the video again to get the answers. Came up with 2 major. Gives us 9, sharp 11, and 13. 2 major on B Lydian is C sharp major. There's the C sharp chord. voice led. It's giving you that Lydian sound. Okay, now we'll finish the rest of the examples. Put the answers up. I'd like you to figure out what you think I used here. That'd be good practice for you, and then I'll put up the labels. But I used all very typical upper structures to create the sound of that mode, and just check it out, figure out what it is, and then pause the video to do that, and then to restart to see what I actually did. Here's what it sounds like. One solution for the polychords. You can check your answers against that. Of course, there's many other possibilities, but the method that I suggest, I think, would always lead you in the direction of correct answers. Harmonize this melody using constant structure and contiguous 2/5. Constant structure part, I recommend that you look for some kind of chord quality indication. Some kind of third would be a real giveaway. And then in addition to the third, maybe a seventh. So if you look at these opening notes, you see a C, D, E, and a C. Well, it shows you a major third. E to C, so that indicates probably some kind of C major chord. Then you look at the next one, and you see there's a G to an E flat. That indicates some kind of E flat major chord. And then the E to G sharp, E major chord, and G to B here, G major chord. It suggests constant structure major triads. It could also be major sevenths or dominant sevenths, because there's no seventh revealed in any of this. So some kind of major structure. Then the contiguous 2/5s, I recommend that you look at the last one and figure out what 2/5 relationship that is. Is it resolving down a fifth? Is it resolving up by a half step or whatever into this chord? Once you figure that out, then you figure out the next ones. You'll start to notice the pattern, because contiguous 2/5s always move by half step, whole step, or minor third in an upward direction. And there's the answer for number 4. Okay, question 5. The main thing to realize about this is that you're looking for deceptive resolutions, and you're also looking for a way to logically get back to the one chord. Logical means strong root motion. So root motion down a fifth, root motion down a half step, or in some cases root motion by step. But what you're going to be looking for when you see this down a fifth arrow is you're going to be looking for a sub-5, because that's what's going to be deceptive for the sub-5. Conversely, over here, you have a chord that's going down a half step, but it's a deceptive. So this is going to be a secondary dominant, because secondary dominants, you expect to go down a fifth, and when they go down a half step, they're deceptive. So bearing that in mind and everything else I've said, come up with your answer, and then I'll give you one possible answer that you can relate your answer to, even if it isn't exactly the same as what I've come up with. Well, at least you can use the same logic to justify it. Okay, so we're back. So here's one possibility. So there's obviously more than one right answer here, but the key thing is you got to get a deceptive thing happening here, and you've got to have logical root motion from your last chord back to your first. At the last page, it's just analysis, but you have to be able to translate hybrid voicings so that you understand how they're functioning. And so, for example, G over F, major triad, based on the 5th degree of a major chord scale. By now, hopefully you immediately recognize that as a substitute for a major 7 chord. Before you look at the answer key, remember to have done your own analysis, have thought it through, done the best you can by listening to the audio version of this, which is posted separately, and then check the answer key, which is coming up next. Answer, and I'll just zero in on the things that I think people would have the most questions about. G over F, just by going by the chord symbol, it could be a major 7 or it could be a dominant 7th. But the way you know it's major 7th is because of the melody. Note content has an E natural, and again, translating this into a major 7 sound to major 7, there's the major 7th again. Second time through, we get 2 major 7, but then constant structure moving upwards into a modulation, G major, notated here. Flat 7 major 7, again, translating a hybrid. 5 over 3, the 5 chord of the key over its third, but the root motion is still down a fifth. That's why the arrow is there. Pivot chord modulation, old key 2, 5, new key 4 minor, flat 7, 7, going back to 1. Actually, I'll take away the arrow. The arrow shouldn't be there because that isn't where it ends up. So that was an error. There should be no error because it's flat 7, 7 that's resolving back to the E. Coda, and you have a series of hybrids that all translate into major 7th sounds, and that's their Roman numerals.